and heard the world breaking. Not with a bang, but with a shout. Why do we mistake volume for victory?
Wow. Yeah, that's a really intense way to start off.
Right. But I mean, we've all done it. Like you get mad, you get loud, and in that blinding moment of, adrenaline, you genuinely believe you're winning the argument.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like winning.
It really does. But the philosophical framework we are exploring today in this deep dive, which is a text known as The Echo of the Unbound, it basically argues that we are actually doing the exact opposite. Like we are fundamentally misreading human behavior.
Yeah, and the central premise of that text really dismantles this deeply ingrained cultural assumption we have, that sheer noise equates to dominance.
Yeah, the loudest guy in the room wins.
Exactly. We are so conditioned to look at a heated conflict and just assume the loudest person is the one in charge. But the source material argues that volume is not a display of strength at all. It's actually a catastrophic collapse of discipline.
Okay, let's unpack this because to explain the mechanics of that collapse,
Mhm.
the author introduces this psychological dichotomy that operates inside our minds during any kind of conflict.
Right.
And they call these two opposing forces the Warden and the Shadow. And I know it sounds a bit abstract at first, like a fantasy novel or
It
something,
does, yeah, a little bit.
but the behavioral mapping is actually incredibly precise, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, the terminology is very deliberate. So the warden represents the prefrontal cortex functioning at its peak.
Like the logical brain.
Right, exactly. It's
Yeah.
reasoned power, intellect, calculated discipline. The warden doesn't just manage the situation in front of you, it manages the self.
Right.
But the shadow, on the other hand, well, that represents the limbic system in full hijack mode. It's the primal, unthinking reflex.
Fight or flight.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And the text suggests that raising our voices is basically the physical manifestation of the shadow slipping its leash. Like, the moment your volume spikes, you have abandoned the role of the warden.
You're just totally checked out.
Yeah, you are no longer navigating the conflict. You're just a passenger to your own nervous system at that point.
Man, when you look at an argument through that lens, you stop seeing two people trying to communicate. Like you just see two wardens who have, dropped their leashes and they're just letting their shadows drag them through the dirt.
Dragging them right through the mud. Yeah.
But I mean, the framework doesn't stop at just psychological definitions. It moves into the actual tangible cost of letting that leash slip. Because if a shout is a loss of control, the text attempts to quantify what exactly we are losing.
Right. The currency of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this brings us to one of the more, I guess, cryptic concepts in the material, which is the 501 empire.
Oh, yes, the 501 empire. This is where the author shifts from psychology into a strict, almost unforgiving model of energy economics.
Energy economics, I like that.
Yeah, well, the framework asks you to view your internal cognitive capacity as a finite currency. The empire is the sovereignty you hold over your own mind, your resources, your focus.
Okay, so where does the number 501 come in?
Right, so 501 is the linchpin of the whole theory. The author posits this chronological model of a trigger. When you are insulted or threatened, it takes roughly 500 milliseconds for your brain to process the stimulus and prepare a response.
That half-second window. So that's the domain of the warden.
But it's the entirety of your empire.
Yeah.
Those 500 milliseconds are where you analyze, where you calculate and decide. But the 501st millisecond, that is the threshold of action.
The point of no return.
Exactly. If you have not locked down your emotional response by that 501st millisecond, the shadow takes over and vocalizes the panic. The moment you cross into the 501st millisecond with a shout, the empire basically falls.
You go bankrupt.
You go completely bankrupt. Every decibel of volume you output above a normal speaking register is cognitive energy literally being bled out of your system. It's stolen away from your capacity to actually resolve the problem.
Okay, I hear that, but I don't really buy that it is a complete waste, though.
Yeah.
Like, I have to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening who has ever navigated a really high-stakes environment.
Sure, yeah. Lay it on me.
Because sometimes, like, say a contractor is totally ignoring safety protocols or a negotiation is completely stalled out, raising your voice shatters the complacency,
Right.
right?
Just get attention, yeah.
Right. It forces the other person to pay attention. So in practice, shouting often feels incredibly productive because it gets immediate results.
Well, the text actually anticipates that exact defense. It acknowledges that shouting forces compliance, absolutely, but it draws a really hard line between compliance driven by a startle response and actual sustainable resolution.
Ah, so scaring someone isn't the same as solving the problem.
Exactly. And to address that, that illusion of productivity, the framework introduces a counter concept to the reactive shout. It calls it the premeditated lash.
The premeditated lash. That sounds intense.
It is, but in a very controlled way. See, the shadow's shout feels like action because it requires massive physical exertion. I mean, your heart rate spikes, your breath shortens, your vocal cords strain.
You feel like you're doing a lot.
You feel like you're doing so much. But it is purely reactive. It's just a biological spasm. True power within the 501 empire is entirely active. It is the premeditated lash.
So what does that look like?
It's a calculated, perfectly timed intervention that dismantles the opponent's position without elevating your heart rate. Shouting is just noise filling a void because the warden couldn't formulate a premeditated lash in time.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that distinction between the reactive spasm and the calculated intervention,
Yeah.
it makes me think of like the difference between a busted fire hydrant and an industrial laser cutter.
Oh, I like that. Walk me through that.
So like a sheared off fire hydrant is terrifyingly loud. It's blasting thousands of gallons of water in every direction. It's creating massive chaos. And yeah, it absolutely commands the attention of everyone on the street.
You definitely can't ignore it.
Right. But it is completely untethered. It's just this undirected leak of pressure. And that is the reactive shout.
That is a very apt mechanical translation of the text because it's all mess, no focus.
Exactly. But the laser cutter, by contrast, operates in near silence. Like, it takes an immense amount of energy, but it focuses it into a microscopic, highly pressurized point. It doesn't make a mess. It simply slices straight through the steel.
It just gets the job done.
Yeah, it's deliberate, it's contained, and it's devastatingly effective. That is the premeditated lash.
And if you apply that analogy back to the 501 empire, the goal is to hoard your energy until you can deploy it as the laser cutter.
Save the energy.
Right. When you let the hydrant burst, you are just flooding the street. You might startle the people around you into backing away, sure, but you haven't actually fixed the underlying structural problem. You have just depleted your own reservoir.
Okay, so if the shout is fundamentally just an inefficient, reactive leak of pressure, like a busted hydrant, why is it so deeply entangled with our cultural perception of authority?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because we instinctively cower when someone yells. If it is such a massive waste of energy, why does it work so well to intimidate us?
Yeah. Well, the author offers a rather uncomfortable answer to that, actually. The framework asserts that a shout is not an expression of dominance at all. It is a public confession of weakness.
A confession? Wow. Here's where it gets really interesting, because calling it a confession completely changes the power dynamic of a room.
It really does. It strips the shouter of all their perceived authority, because according to the text, when you resort to yelling, you are broadcasting a twofold failure.
Okay, what are the two failures?
First, you are admitting that you've lost control over the external variables. The argument is not going your way, the contractor isn't listening, the negotiation is failing, you've lost the room.
That makes sense. And the second?
Second, and honestly much more critically, you are admitting that you have lost control over your internal environment. Your warden has been overthrown.
The leash snapped.
The leash snapped. You have run out of intellectual tools, and you're just hoping that raw biological noise will somehow act as a substitute for actual capability.
To drive this point home, about true strength versus the mere illusion of volume, the source material utilizes a metaphor that I found incredibly striking.
The dog metaphor, right?
Yeah. It contrasts the frantic noise of a typical argument with the silent state of a domesticated pit bull. And, I mean, let's strip away the cliché alpha dog tropes often associated with this kind of imagery, because the author is really using it to explain the mechanics of kinetic potential.
Exactly. It's about potential energy. The text describes a fully disciplined individual, someone whose warden has absolute sovereignty over the 501 empire, as possessing a presence that is absolute.
Just undeniable.
Undeniable. And the domesticated pit bull resting quietly in a room serves as the avatar for this state. Think about it. The animal isn't growling, it isn't pacing, and it certainly isn't straining against a leash. It is entirely at rest.
But you still know what it can do.
Right. Its capability for extreme violence is universally understood, even when it's sleeping.
It possesses massive kinetic potential, but it is fully contained.
Contained and regulated. That silent, withheld power is infinitely more commanding than, say, a smaller reactive dog that throws itself frantically against a chain link fence, just barking at every passing car.
Because the frantic barking is just an expression of anxiety. Like the dog on the fence is bleeding its kinetic energy into the air because it feels threatened. It's trying to convince the threat and probably itself, that it is dangerous.
It's compensating.
Right. The pit bull doesn't need to convince anyone. Its power is an established, undeniable fact. By shouting, we are basically throwing ourselves against the chain link fence.
We are broadcasting our insecurity to the whole neighborhood. The author emphasizes that withholding your power is the ultimate flex of the warden. Like, when you observe two people arguing, just pay attention to their physiology.
Oh yeah, it's a dead giveaway.
Totally. The person shouting has a flushed face, their breathing is erratic, their movements are jerky and jagged. Those are biological distress signals.
They are losing the battle internally.
Yeah, exactly. But the person who maintains a low, even cadence, who keeps their physical movements minimal, they are signaling surplus capacity. They are communicating that the current stressor does not require their full resources to manage.
Think about the most genuinely authoritative, intimidatingly competent people you have ever encountered in your life or your career. Like, the people who truly dictate the reality of a room.
We all know someone like that.
Yeah. When a catastrophic failure occurs, when millions of dollars are on the line and the pressure completely spikes, do they start screaming at their subordinates? Or do they get frighteningly, unnervingly quiet?
They drop their volume. Always. They slow their cadence right down.
Because the quiet is the warden locking down the 501 empire. The quiet is the laser cutter calibrating its coordinates.
I love that. Calibrating its coordinates.
The noise is just the shadow panicking. And once you absorb this framework, you really can never look at a shouting match the same way again. You stop seeing an intimidating display of force, and you just start seeing an adult throwing a neurological temper tantrum.
A neurological temper tantrum. That is so accurate. And that realization neutralizes the intimidation factor entirely. Like, once you recognize the shout as a vulnerability, it just loses its psychological grip on you.
Which brings us to the operational core of this deep dive. Because diagnosing the shout as a weakness is one thing, right? That's easy. But how does the framework instruct us to actually reclaim our power?
The application part.
Right. Say we are in the heat of a brittle argument. That 500 to 1 millisecond window is closing super fast and the hydrant is about to burst. How do we stop the hijack?
Well, the source material provides a cognitive anchor for this exact threshold. It mandates that in the face of escalating conflict, you must bring your mind to the, quote, river and the mountain sunrise.
Okay, I have to be honest here. When I first read that, it sounded like a guided meditation track. Like, how is picturing a Bob Ross landscape supposed to stop a massive surge of cortisol and adrenaline when someone has just deeply insulted my intelligence?
Yeah, if you interpret it as mere relaxation imagery, it totally fails. It sounds silly. But the author is actually outlining a specific biological override mechanism, which they term the absolute selection.
The absolute selection.
The goal is not to passively calm down, like you're not trying to find your zen. The goal is to force the prefrontal cortex back online by giving it a complex processing task.
Ah. You are intentionally starving the limbic system of fuel.
Exactly. It's exactly the opposite of what the shadow wants. When anger spikes, blood flow rushes to the amygdala to prepare for a fight-or-flight response. Your vision narrows, your spatial awareness collapses.
You literally get tunnel vision.
You do, and the absolute selection demands that you actively refuse this biological default. Visualizing the river and the mountain sunrise is deliberate cognitive labor.
Because rendering the complex geometry of a mountain, or like the chaotic light refraction of flowing water, that requires intense visual and spatial processing.
Yes, it demands massive amounts of glucose and oxygen in the neocortex. So, by forcing your brain to construct this intricate, immovable landscape right in the middle of a screaming match, you are manually rerouting the blood flow away from the panic center and back into the logic center.
That is fascinating.
The river represents continuous, unbothered data flow, right? And the mountain represents immovable perspective. You are not running away to a peaceful meadow. You are rebooting the computer so the warden can retake the controls.
You're executing the absolute selection. Like, you are catching the lie, the shadow tells you the lie, that volume will save you, and you are actively choosing the silent power of the pit bull.
You tighten the leash.
You tighten the leash, you refuse to confess weakness, and you hold your kinetic energy in reserve until you can deliver that precise, calculated, premeditated lash that actually solves the problem.
It is an exhausting, relentless daily discipline, honestly. It is the refusal to surrender your sovereignty to the noise of the ego.
So what does this all mean for us? Like, how do we integrate this tomorrow morning? Because we are walking away from this text with a radically altered definition of what it means to raise our voices.
Completely different paradigm.
Yeah. The next time you are pushed to the edge, when an employee makes a critical error, or a family member expertly pushes that one button they know triggers you, you are going to feel that heat rise in your chest.
We all do.
The 501 millisecond window will open. In that microsecond, remember the 501 empire. Recognize that every decibel you add to your voice is cognitive currency stolen from the solution. Do not let the busted hydrant flood the street.
Right. Keep it contained.
Execute the absolute selection. Build the mountain in your mind, let the river flow, and let your silence be absolute.
You know, we have spent this time analyzing how to maintain your own internal warden, like how to keep your own shadow on a tight leash.
Yeah.
But consider the external application of this framework before we conclude.
Oh, that's a good point.
If shouting is universally a confession of weakness, right? If it is an undeniable biological signal of a lost empire, how should that alter your perception of the next person who shouts at you?
Wow.
Instead of feeling your own adrenaline spike to match their aggression, what happens if you view their outbursts through the lens of the 501 empire? What if you simply hear their shout as a tragic admission that they have lost control of their own mind? Does their noise still have any power over your silence?